Good morning. Welcome to the Carroll County Commissioners' open session for Thursday, May 30th. And as we always do, we'd like to start with Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I think we started over there. So Commissioner Rothstein, you're up.
I am happy to be here.
All right.
So,
Is it a good day?
It is a good day. My daughter came in from Montana, and so she's here for a week, so I'm happy that, life is good. I think the only thing I just want to share is Memorial Day. I know we all participated in different events across the county and community. I was fortunate to participate in the American Legion Post 223, where I'm a lifetime member of, but I was a keynote and had probably about 100, 120, 150 folks there. So it was a nice showing on kind of a miserable late morning. And it was good. It was a good opportunity to be with the community, reflect on some of the things that are going well, remind ourselves of some of the folks that we have lost over time. For me, whether it was in combat or just in life. And, as I share, the bottom line, when somebody thanks me for serving, I turn around and thank them for giving me a good reason to serve. And we just got an awesome county and country to serve and participate in. So, and then, we're going to hear from, the county executive, Olszewski. He and I were part of the Mako board retreat. Well, it wasn't a retreat, it was an event yesterday evening where we had the opportunity to do one-on-one conversations with some of our key sponsors for the Maryland Association of Counties. And we could not operate if we didn't have those sponsors. I had an opportunity, I spoke with somebody from Comcast, from Accenture, and they give a lot of money towards Mako to allow us to do the things we do, but they're also key leaders in the community, businessmen and women that share with us what's on their mind, and they get the opportunity to talk to the board directly in Mako. So that was a good event, albeit a little wet weather, but we were able to survive. And that's all I got for now, but thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Bigliotti.
Thank you, Commissioner Kyler. Good morning, everybody. So over the weekend, as Commissioner Rothstein had noted, I had...
And for the record, you have pages, right?
Well, just one page, single space,
Oh, okay.
and some
Okay.
handwriting
Okay.
today, too.
Go ahead.
So on Sunday, I had the honor of speaking at the 106th anniversary of the Pleasant Valley Memorial Day ceremony, along with Westminster City Councilman and Fire Chaplain Kevin Dayhoff. It was a wonderful ceremony. It featured incredible live music, singing, and prayers. Monday, I had the honor of joining Tawnytown Mayor Christopher Miller, Councilwoman Diane Foster, Delegate Chris Tomlinson, and Delegate Eric Boucher at the Tawnytown Memorial Day ceremony at the American Legion. And of note in this picture on the right here, this group photograph, the gentleman with the walker is the oldest living veteran in the city of Tawnytown. He is 95 years old. His name is Elmer Ray Wilson, Jr. Absolutely wonderful gentleman, really good guy, and it was an honor to have been on hand for the delegates to present him with a proclamation honoring his service.
That's an awesome Carroll County name, Elmer Ray.
Yeah, it
Come
is.
on.
Where is what facility are you in for the photo?
Oh, the American Legion in Tawnytown, Hessen Snyder Post 120. And so weather was supposed to turn out pretty bad on Monday, and so the Legion graciously offered the use of the hall up to the town at no charge. And we actually had a bigger turnout than Tawnytown usually does for the ceremony, not least of which because everybody was inside and air conditioning and not outside. So that was really, really awesome. Then on Tuesday, I had the privilege of joining Commissioner Elaine Stem from the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs in presenting a proclamation on behalf of the Carroll County Board of Commissioners declaring May 28th to be General Anthony Wayne Day to the Westminster chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution at the American Legion in Tawnytown. Again, they graciously offered up use of the facility at no charge for the event. The ceremony was for the dedication of an historic marker denoting the Bruceville encampment of Pennsylvania troops at Big Pipe Creek just outside of Tawnytown as they marched to join American forces in Virginia battling the British. Time was also taken that day to recount the actions of Maryland troops who, in the years before, saved George Washington's army from annihilation at the Battle of Long Island, and in underscoring the important role that Maryland had to play in the course of the American Revolution. And what was also awesome was that not only was Delegate Eric Boucher on hand for that, but the Honorable Joe Getty was on hand as well for the ceremony too. And I certainly, want to thank Legion Commander Kate Irwin not only for the use of the facility, but for the photos as well. And last but not least, I have two quick events to plug here for the town of Union Bridge. This Saturday, June 1st, from 11:30 a.m. to 3 o'clock p.m., Dream Big Union Bridge will be hosting their 6th annual Rubber Duck Derby and Jeep Show and Shine Festival. It will include a rubber duck race, Jeep show, raffles, kids zone, petting zoo, food trucks, craft vendors, and it will be a family-oriented day, and there will be a free shuttle to the event from different parking lots. And also, next week and a half, on Tuesday, June 11th, from noon to 2:30 p.m., the town of Union Bridge is doing a free snow cone event at the square in Union Bridge at the corner of Main and East Broadway. I've been to those before. They're definitely worth checking out. And Commissioner, that's all for me this morning.
Just
Thank
want to
you.
know if Commissioner Kyler was in the Battle of Long Island in the Revolutionary War, so that's all.
He's got the mustache
Is
for
that
it.
age discrimination?
It is not age
Can I sue or
discrimination.
something?
It is recognizing my elders.
Did-
That's all.
We could dedicate a monument.
Commissioner Gordon, can you please interrupt him and start?
I don't know about interrupting, but I'll take over. Thank you. So, as all of us, this Memorial Day, many of us were all at various locations. I was at the 156th Westminster Parade, which I think it's just absolutely amazing that we have one of the longest running parades in the country. I say one of because there are a lot of questions as to whether we're first. I know there's a couple other areas, but we did have Mary Shellman, who's a historical staple of the Westminster area that founded the parade here in 1868. Was very fortunate to be in attendance in that. Incredible turnout as always. And I have to say that the highlight for me, if I can put it that way, was I got to meet a gentleman named Edward Starrett, who was a recipient of the Navy Cross, and incredibly humble individual. It's the second highest honor obtainable, and it was very impressive just to talk to him and just hear a little bit of his story, but just an incredibly humble individual that does not want serious accolades, and it was just very incredible to talk to him. And then for me, as somebody that grew up in Westminster, I was always on the sidewalk as a kid. I had both my two grandfathers, one in World War II that was in the Navy, the other was in the Army in World War II. And then, of course, growing up as I did as a young kid, we had a gentleman in the neighbor who served in World War I. So it was very typical for me to be hanging out with all three of those gentlemen that served. So, as always, just really appreciate all the freedoms and definitely those that paid the ultimate sacrifice, and just can't say enough about all those that have served. And just great to see the community come out as a whole, as they always do, and I think we do it great here in Carroll County, to say the least. I'm going to be incredibly brief this morning. One other thing I am going to mention, though, on the 8th at the Carroll County Farm Museum, they're holding their inaugural flea market event. So if you've got some free time, stop out, check out the vendors, and support our farm museum and those that will be setting up there. And that's all I have this week. Thank you.
Commissioner Gary?
A wonderful Memorial Day in my town, Mount Airy, Maryland, and thanks to my American Legion Post 191 for accommodating due to the weather. Again, it was a terrific ceremony. I wasn't directly involved with it, but it was just great to be there. And as always, the town really does it right. If you haven't been to Mount Airy for a while, please come and visit us. Downtown Mount Airy's changed a lot, and we've got a lot of new shops and things like that. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Memorial Day, I was in Hampstead. They have a memorial in front of the old Hampstead High School, and they do music. They've got a lot of stuff there. That was a great morning. They actually closed off Main Street, and it was a pretty good crowd, and it was a great morning. The day before, the Thursday last week, after our meeting, a couple of us went to Carroll Hospital to listen about their emergency room plans, and I thought that was pretty awesome. And the hospital, the emergency room, it's something we really, really need in Carroll County. We really, really use. And until you get into the details, there's a lot of things have changed over time. There's a lot of things that can really speed up the use of the emergency room, which all the hospitals need to do. And they even had different patterns for ambulances, how they would back in to avoid, I think some of the ambulances end up being there for like 2 hours, and they're looking at staging areas to minimize that. So it's a lot of good ideas and a good plan.
The last time it was renovated was 22 years ago, and it's part of LifeBridge, so it's working, part of the LifeBridge system. But you're right. It is a great community player here in in the county. So
Yeah, and it was a good, fairly quick presentation on
it was
all the
good.
details, some great plans, showed the existing and what the new would be, and it was a lot of good ideas. I met with the Ethiopian Church and talked with them. Potentially, there's a court date coming up with them, and they have some issues, and neighbors have some concerns, but it was a good meeting and a good talk. So much of, and they're in process of planning review and permits, and we talked about that. So many of the projects in Carroll County, a lot of it is communication. It just seems like, and I just want to encourage people, if you have a question, call, because we'll see an engineer, a developer, a church assume something while the county's assuming something else, and it just, they're each waiting for each other, and nothing happens. And lots of times, a phone call speeds that up great. Mr. Vigliotti and I are doing a meeting tomorrow with PSAG over a transmission line. It'll be interesting. We've gathered some questions from other commissioners, and I think they want to try to get us an agenda today, and I think they're working very hard with their engineers to try to have a map that shows their proposed plan, which I know that's everybody's first question is, where does this go? And so it'll be interesting, and we'll share with everyone what we hear.
just a sidebar on that real quick, because, again, county executive is in the audience afterwards, if you'd like to talk, because PSE&G is going to be putting the power lines straight through Baltimore County, and with a 2027 timeline, this is pretty aggressive. They are coming to see us tomorrow with slide decks from their engineers, and we can push them your way, or you tell us who to push them to, but
Amends the Westminster chapter.
decided to react to it. So the way they decided to do it was, I'd say, fairly peaceful. They wanted to stop all trade whatsoever with Great Britain and the West Indies. They requested that there be a meeting of the counties in Annapolis to try to coordinate the same thing at the state level. And they promised that they would not deal with any town, county, or province that did not fall in line the same way. They established a committee of correspondence that then would coordinate with the other counties as to what was going on. And 3 of those men seemed to own property in what would one day be Carroll County. So it seems fitting and proper that we keep that in mind. The 250th isn't just going to be in 2026. In fact, actually, it's been going on since about 2015. Over in Frederick County, they did the 250th anniversary of the Repudiation Act, which was to protest the Stamp Act. And that was just part of a long fuse. Now, we get to 2026, we'll be able to celebrate the 250th anniversary. But it was still a hard-fought thing. It was dicey for a very long time. And as Commissioner Vigliotti mentioned, we did an honoring of the encampment at Bruceville just the other day. That was part of what ultimately would be the Yorktown campaign that would defeat the British at Yorktown. Wayne came down, he and Lafayette harassed them and kept them in Yorktown until Washington and Rochambeau came down as well. The SAR is going to be pushing and doing as much as it can in terms of events to celebrate all aspects of that. We're about 38,000 members, both in the United States and across the world, and every one of us traces our ancestry down to a man or a woman who either provided military or civil or some sort of patriotic service. We encourage every man who can to try to find out if they do have an ancestor like that and to join us. We are here to try to preserve that history and make certain that it is well known to the modern day people. So thank you again for this proclamation, and you'll be certainly seeing a lot of the SAR in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any comments?
Just, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I just appreciate always the opportunity, Jim, for you to come in and share with us, what's on your mind. I was not from Maryland. I was born and raised up in Jersey, in Wayne, New Jersey, and I went to Anthony Wayne Junior High School. So, Anthony Wayne had a significant footprint with his troops up there and then coming down along with Washington. So, really appreciate the comments you make, the discussion, and the impact of those leaders here in Maryland, because you can't put yourself in their shoes. There's so much, and the more we can, I think the better opportunities is for ourselves and our children and generations to realize, the impact that they had 250 plus years ago. So, but no, I appreciate you being here this morning. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you, appreciate you coming in this morning and definitely keeping that history alive, because that's so important. As we strangely seem to get away from history at times, less and less of those facts and information seem to make the newspaper. You look back even say 20 years ago when you'd see things about, the Titanic sinking or the Lincoln assassination, which today it's not even a footnote on those days in history, be it that or a variety of other things. So for whatever reason, we seem to lose that for more modern headlines, but I appreciate everything you and everyone are doing. I did want to mention, though, and I'm sure you saw that last week when we had the proclamation for the 250th. Definitely, I would suggest reaching out to Jason Alari over at the Historical Society, because it's definitely a collaboration of everybody. Like they mentioned, and I know I mentioned last week, the municipalities, some are getting involved, but I think the attitude for everybody in the community is the more the merrier, because we want to showcase that history as best we can. So I would appreciate anything you all can assist with as well.
We're already in talks with them. In
Perfect.
fact, they were very helpful when we were doing a lot of the work to get that encampment marker taken care of. It took a couple years, but, we don't have that many things marking the revolution in our county, and it's great to have that in place. It's the first marker, actually, that we have in Maryland for that marching route. We're working with Pennsylvania and Virginia to make certain that all of them are marked, so that hopefully when we get to the 250th of those events, we'll have a big event for that as well, going through all the counties. That's my hope, at least.
That's fantastic.
And so, like Commissioner Rossi, I'm originally from Long Island, New York, and to visit my grandparents who lived in Laurel at the time, we would have to go through the southern eastern end of Long Island to get through the city. And I remember one day driving past, there's a marker where the Battle of Long Island happened. It's surrounded by major roads, and it's like, unless you actually stop to get out to look at this, you just don't notice it. And so to find out, all these years later that, we'd played such a pivotal role in specifically that battle that the battlefield is nothing but highways now. And so, the efforts that you and the Sons and other groups are undertaking to try to preserve this so it doesn't disappear. I mean, if I'd never just glanced out of my window on one of the family vacations, I would never have known that this happened. And, so I cannot commend you and your group and everybody else enough for what you do to preserve the history in this county. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I will say that up in Brooklyn, they do an annual Battle Week where they commemorate the battle itself. It's right next to William Alexander Middle School, and William Alexander was also known as Lord Sterling, who commanded the Maryland troops there. Seems like up in New York, they actually know a little bit more about Maryland history in that way than some Marylanders do. It was a commendable thing. We have a bus trip going up, so hey, if anybody would like to come, just let me know and we'll get you the information.
If you take him away for a month, I'll
I'll write you letters with parchment
Oh, that's
and ink.
fine.
Okay, are we ready to do a photo?
Yeah.
So,
Since, by chance, we have someone here from Baltimore County, do we want them in the photo also?
you want to get in there? I'd be happy to. Absolutely.
You're fine.
1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Vice President, how are you, sir? You as well. Pleasure online.
Yeah. Item 1 on the agenda, a presentation from MACO. For those maybe watching, Maryland Association of Counties, and we've had a great relationship with them. They have come on up to the table. We've had a great relationship with them, both the commissioners and various staff, and they seem to have a little bit of power in Annapolis.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, Commissioners. Johnny Olszewski, Baltimore County Executive, President of MACO for this year, with my colleague and friend Michael Sanderson, the Executive Director. It is a pleasure to join you. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. I want to thank Carroll County in advance for their incredible involvement. Your county administrator is super involved and helpful in the work that we do. Commissioner Rothstein is one of our board members, and we just thank all of you for your involvement. We really are proud of the work that we do, not just in the state legislature, but also as a convener and information sharing organization. And we've had a lot of successes, I think, advocating for local government and telling the story of what we're all facing. I know that we're all, in our roles, facing challenges with things like Blueprint and education spending transparency, school construction, any number of issues. So Michael's here today to just give a brief update of some of the work over the past year, but also, especially for me, but I think also for MACO, we're also very interested in Carroll-specific issues, things that you are all working on, what keeps you up at night, how we can be helpful as an organization to support the great work happening here in Carroll County. And then, so we'll kick things over to Michael to give a few updates, answer any questions you may have, but also would love to hear anything you have to share as well that we can take back.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for the time. Again, I'm Michael Sanderson, the director at the Maryland Association of Counties. You teed us up nicely by saying we're an organization that can get some things done in the political process in Annapolis. That's part of our role. I don't think it's our exclusive role, but this time of year, just a few weeks after the legislative session and counties kind of going through their own budget process and so forth, it's sort of natural to reflect backward a little bit. So indulge me for a moment, I'll do a bit of that. We've got a packet of stuff for you. I don't plan to go through that in a lot of detail, but the front page is sort of meant to be headline stuff. County governments are affected. I think our portfolio of issues is the broadest of any stakeholder in the political process. The state counts on counties to deliver so many frontline services. They set the tone and they set the tempo, but we're the ones actually getting stuff done. It's you and your agencies at the local level who are delivering so many services locally. We always do some metrics in reverse to take a look at engagement on legislative issues, and invariably we find MACO's presence on a bill moves the needle. The bills that we support have a higher chance of passing. When we raise concerns with a bill, it becomes a high priority to either remedy those concerns or try and work with us and see if we can, come to an amendment or something along those lines, or some of those ideas just get shelved and look for a better avenue. So it's a combination of offense and defense, but we do our best to be the voice on behalf of your county and those across the state. I'll skip through a handful of issues, and I won't be able to do justice to everything, but if there's something I give short shrift to or miss, happy to hear from you, and we can talk further about any of the above. I'll start with fiscal stuff, because that tends to be sort of the tone setter for every legislative session. What's the budget going to look like? What kind of year are we going to be in? And this was a peculiar, we're in a tough spot. I feel like this is 3 or 4 or 5 years in a row of saying this sort of thing. The peculiar economy in and around the pandemic, and now in sort of the aftermath of all the federal activity that helped stave off economic collapse during the pandemic, has just put us in a peculiar spot for forecasting revenues, for reading the American economy, and for trying to make plans in the public sector, what's going to happen with your tax revenues and so forth. So there's just asterisks aplenty. Even though you have extraordinary fiscal staff and management, it's still like the dart throwing is harder than ever, I think. The state is in a similar situation. Federal money has dried up, and we've gone from an economy that was propped up maybe a bit by federal support to being less so, and the state is now facing some red ink on their multiple year forecasts of where they are a couple years out, especially once the costs of the blueprint land on the state. This is a little bit of a nuance, but it's an important one. The state has money in an education trust fund because the voters, by constitutional amendment, put casino money into an education trust fund for education initiatives, not just to pay for today's stuff that would have been paid for by the general fund. That happened before the blueprint started rolling, so they've got a piggy bank to pay for all of their 24 costs and all of the 25 costs and all of their 26 costs. And it's not until FY27 that they start seeing pressure on their own general fund to pay for the stateside costs of the blueprint, which are substantial. So if you're in a forecasting meeting, you see that number a few years down the road, but that's always different from the right now, this year, what's happening today. The place where we felt a pinch and came out on the good side, but not without a lot of work, was in transportation. You may remember back around Thanksgiving or so of last year, Transportation Department announced a series of, we've got a couple $1 billion shortfall in our 6-year plan. We're going to have to do these various austerity measures, including cutting back on highway user revenues. For those of you who have had an opportunity to look backward a little ways, it used to be that the state gave a very reasonable share of its revenues from transportation, gas tax, vehicle tax, that sort of thing, back to the cities, back to the counties to do local transportation needs. You don't have a local gas tax. Some places do that, we don't. So we're dependent on them for transportation revenues, and In the Great Recession in 2009, summer of 2009, we kind of got thrown overboard. That was intended to be a short-term thing, as usually the recession cuts are, but it just lingered and it got baked in, and we're still not back. You can do the arithmetic on how severe that's been for each jurisdiction, but it's a staggering loss to local resources. We were on the chopping block for the 3 years ahead. The governor sort of found some couch cushion money, and so we don't have to do it this coming year. But there was still a battle all the way through the last week of session as to what was going to happen with highway user revenue and these transportation cuts. The state found some new revenues to sort of stave that off, but that debate is not over. It's going to be back next year as far as what is going to happen with transportation. The good thing that happened, though, is by having, in an odd way, by having the administration call their shot and say, we're going to need to make these drastic cuts, it gave us a window to talk to legislators about what they would mean on the ground. And particularly in the House of Delegates, we have won over a series of champions for local road funding who didn't even know about this issue 2 or 3 years ago. In 2009, in political terms, that's like the dinosaurs ruling, walking the earth. That's just such a long time ago. The people who are chairs of committees today weren't even in the legislature when these cuts were made. They don't have any idea of this history unless you get them to read page 17 of a report, and no one does that. So anyway, I'm carrying on a little bit, but that's a major win from this session, but an issue that's not behind us. We won in '24.
Just want to share, I met with the comptroller now a few weeks ago, and asking her what's keeping her up at night. It's exactly that, it's transportation, and how they're going to pay for it, whether highway user revenue will come back next year or not. It's a year-by-year situation. We depend on it here in Carroll County, and thinking we were not going to get it, and then it came in our hands, it wasn't like a plus up, it was they're putting back what they took away.
Taken away, right.
So, that's, the big advocacy for highway user revenue in the upcoming years. I mean, it's tough if you can't forecast it and plan for it, so.
Well, some of us were in the state legislature back in 2009 when that cut was made. Actually, it was a much smaller cut by the legislature, and it was supposed to be temporary. The Board of Public Works took a much more draconian action following additional write-downs. And as Michael was saying, unfortunately, the conversation just never picked up. I don't know the exact number for Carroll. For Baltimore County, it's been $450 million of differential from what was to what is. And that was before the additional cut. So I do think MACO has done a very good job this particular past session, not only restoring the additional cuts that were proposed by the administration, but also putting back on the agenda, hey, local governments are responsible for a lot of road resurfacing, bridges, sidewalks, and so we really need the state to step up, not just to not cut us, but also to make sure that we have the resources, particularly as we're trying to also tackle the requirements of Blueprint.
Right.
So that, the state's overall fiscal circumstance and to what degree they're facing belt tightening or the need for more revenues to support their own commitments, I think is an unknown for the next few years. We tend to think in 4-year cycles. Having a fiscal problem that arrives in FY27 is terrible political planning. If you think through the arithmetic of that, that's the 2026 session. It's a lousy time to have a crisis on your hands. So get ahead of it or kick the can another year or whatever. We'll see what Annapolis does on that front. We'll be stakeholders in all that, whether we like it or not. I'll dance through another few things rapidly, I think, here. This was a year where a lot of political attention was spent on housing policy, and there's an awful lot of stakeholders who are deeply invested there. The governor and the housing agency worked hard to develop a series of bills. They decided, rather than surprise the world with them and here's the bills in late January, they went through a whole stakeholder process. They brought counties to the table, MACO in particular, to try and work through where might we find some common ground and so forth. What that led to was a bill passed that leaves opposite ends of a wide spectrum frustrated. There are some aggressive housing advocates who are disappointed that the legislation that passed this year that's going to provide some incentives for housing around transit centers, for housing programs that are getting some state support because they're low-income focused, to have some more preferential treatment in some ways under your local zoning and approval process, some density bonuses, things of that nature. It doesn't go super far. It doesn't override local adequate public facilities laws, which was an original part of the plan. There's a number of things that could have been in the bill that would have been sort of red letter issues for local governments who, I think appropriately, feel most issues of zoning are best managed locally. Community input is a bedrock of what we believe in. Having decisions made by map makers on Preston Street in Baltimore always feels like at best, second best solution. So we come away with legislation passing that most local governments feel is the intrusion is minimal and limited, doesn't get into some of the hottest issues. It also probably won't have the massive effect of transforming the housing market right away. I've never believed that local zoning policy was the single issue driving a shortage in housing in Maryland. We've got market conditions that I think are far more of an effect than the collective effect of all of our local permitting and zoning processes, parking and all those sorts of things. Just 7.5% mortgages changes the affordability of housing, whether you like it or not, and whatever bills you pass are a relatively minor consideration to market conditions like that. So we know we're up against a number of factors. Convincing the General Assembly that they didn't need to take a baseball bat to local governments was a quiet win. That's not going above the fold in the newspaper, but as a practical matter, we came out with a pretty good deal on that. An issue that I think is still live going forward, there were 6, 7, 8 different bills about siting of solar facilities or clean energy facilities, or that sort of stuff. This is an enormous issue in virtually all of rural Maryland right now. It is spreading everywhere, and it's affecting more and more jurisdictions who a few years ago felt like this was an other people's issue. Just the state's made a commitment to clean energy. It's in the renewable portfolio standards. If you're going to provide energy in this state, a lot of it has to be clean. You can't pipe clean energy from Idaho in any practical way. It's got to come from relatively nearby. So there's going to be there's sort of an artificial market for clean energy that comes from nearby. Solar's the easiest and most straightforward way to do it. The state has basically said the rules for power plants are what apply for large solar facilities. Local governments have a very limited role there. Some would like us out of that completely. Don't even ask for a buffer or a line of sight variance or other things along those lines. Get the local governments out of it. They're part of the problem. I don't know how this issue is going to progress, but I know that the momentum is very, very strong on this stuff. So if you're trying to follow the trajectory there, the notion of the Public Service Commission or some state entity becoming the main player on even more and more projects on a smaller and smaller scale is probably the direction this is going, whether we like it or not. I'll mention one other thing that's sort of zoning related. I think we sat here at this table about a year ago and talked about the cannabis implementation law passed by the state. They put it on the ballot, the voters approved it, the state needed to do an implementing bill in the 2023 session, and they left us with literally 2 words of guidance on where we could and could restrict facilities who are going to be the sellers, the new dispensaries. They said reasonable zoning. No one knew what that phrase meant. A number of local jurisdictions, some towns, some counties had gone through process of saying this is what our, or what our map is going to look like. The state came back and passed another bill. I'm not sure that it's perfect, but it does give us a lot clearer guidelines on where you can say no and where you can make restrictions. Half a mile away from another dispensary, 500 feet away from a sensitive facility, a school or church or things along those lines. You can even give a barrier of 100 feet away from a purely residentially zoned area. So we've got more contours in the state law. It may not be perfect guidance, but having some numbers and, sort of chapter and verse to recite is a lot better than having two words that never appeared in state law before. So that's a move in the right direction. I will mention, by the way, community college funding on fiscal issues was another one that had a pendular effect. Oddly, in the governor's proposed budget plan, there was basically not just, sometimes we see this in a budget reconciliation bill, here's the general formula, and this year we're going to take a year off, and we're just going to flat fund it. And then we'll get back to the formula after this year, or after 2 years, or that sort of thing. Kind of out of the blue, the governor's reconciliation bill said, let's scrap the formula that we've been using to get community colleges up to full funding, and it's been a multi-year effort to get there. We'll start over, redo the formula, and come in at a much lower level. Big fight back and forth. A lot of counties sent individual letters. A lot of community college leaders were on the campus in Annapolis talking about their issues. And in my mind, that's principally right up against tuition for the students and folks who are getting training and education at our 2-year schools. That's the third leg of the stool, but that's where that pressure would end up going. They split the baby a little bit, cut the cut in half. It's a little less than they would have been by formula, but the sort of permanent redoing of the formula got set aside. I think that's probably for the best. So there's a number of issues I'm skipping here. They pushed back the date of implementing the paid family leave law that affects all employers, including county governments. I do think that we're going to have an option available for counties to opt into to provide through a co-op. Basically, we're trying to leverage a lot of public sector players, get a good price so that you can have something managed outside the county on your behalf at probably a better price than the state's offering to other folks who are in the state system. I'll stop there. I haven't said much about the blueprint itself. I know that's a big issue that affects county governments, but rather defer to your questions, and if there's something I've missed, let's hear about it.
I'm curious, kind of two parts, and part of it's blueprint. Of course, the governor started out no new taxes, but they feed the heck out of us. What do you think we avoided this year that helped? And does that mean it's going to pop up more strongly next year? And then blueprint, at least for Carroll County, this year was horrible. A lot of requirements and very little state money. Next year, the state money looks pretty positive. Is that at risk?
Okay, let me try and work back to front there. Right now, the commitment by the legislators who have been behind the blueprint plan from the beginning seems very strong. So the notion of it's time to stretch this 10-year plan into 20 and make this year more affordable or kick the can, that sort of stuff, that is not getting any oxygen in Annapolis among the yes votes. I mean, in all candor, there are folks who are critics and there are folks who are skeptical of the blueprint, but it's the folks who said yes the first time and have continued to say yes as they refine, that's really who holds the cards, right? So for the most part, I think their commitment to the funding plan and the general goals of the blueprint appear strong. The place where that will be tested over the next couple of years is a few more counties each year start to have the blueprint number catches up to what they've been doing or exceeds it or drives the county to say, wow, we need to find 9% more for schools and our tax revenue's up 4% in a normal year. How do you do that for a half of your budget, right? And what we're seeing in some places where that starts to boil is the drama of what is going to end up being out of the school budget because the schools are driven to spend blueprint dollars on the blueprint programs with a specificity that the state's never really reached down to the locals before. It's always been make a plan and tell us what's your plan for success with the dollars that came from all these formulas. Now there's a lot more of this dollar is marked and we're going to watch it get all the way down to the student that it was calculated for or the school system or the individual school that it was calculated for. State's never done that before, and it's driving a lot of school systems to say, we have a really popular program. We have Gifted and Talented, or we have a language program, or an international baccalaureate program, or a variety of things like that that seem to be successful and popular, but that's not part of the blueprint. So they come hat in hand to the county governing body and say, we need money above and beyond. The state's given us that, you have to give us this, but then we need an extra tier to continue these local things. Not every county has the capacity to find that above and beyond. And what happens in the jurisdiction, this is not just politically red jurisdictions, this has happened in a number of different places this year. The map is gonna grow next year, and it's possible that that dynamic tests the political resolve a little bit in Annapolis. So I don't think they're shying at the money issues right now, but if a bunch of school systems say we're not gonna have band, it's gonna be really unpopular. That'll generate a lot of letters, and that kind of political pressure could be where the light refracts a little bit.
You know, before you jump to the next topic, because Blueprint is very important to every county. Working to expand the timeline a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road is huge. And I know our delegation spoke with, Pete Ferguson and all of them and saying, okay, how can we, create a scenario that we're not taking away the demands of Blueprint, but we're extending it to give us some breathing room. The same is the breathing room with compensatory education and opening up the aperture of compensatory education on what we can and cannot use those funds for, because we're pretty much handcuffed because of that. And, the governor said last Mako at the board meeting, it's all about the quality of education and not the quantity. So if he is, and I'm going to be pushing the same thing, push the timeline further down the road to allow us the breathing room to do the things necessary. During the Mako conference, I'll tell you, one of the best events was that one, whatever it was, meeting, and it started with just the rural counties, but it ended up being everybody in the room and saying, here are the impacts that are facing us with Blueprint. So I definitely recommend us doing that again, and having the leaders from all the counties in the room for an hour to 2 hours talking about here are the significant impacts. Because if I have the same conversation with Montgomery County, and we're so very different in communities, but it's this exact same issue, or if I have the same issue with you, Johnny, and it's and we're very different demographics, makeup, but it's these very basic, fundamental concerns, that's got to get very, clearly shared with the legislation and the governor.
I mean,
So-
to that point, Commissioner, County Executive Alston Brooks and Mayor Scott were both outspoken, I believe, last year, as they were starting to grapple with their local share consideration. So I think that this is a large, small jurisdiction, urban, rural, lean Republican, lean Dem, we are all in the same
Yep.
situation, or if we're not, we're going to be.
Yeah, well, absolutely, so.
I just think, I think this is obvious, but I'll say it anyway. Politically, saying we need an extended timetable to get our house in order can go through the telephone game and sound on the other end of the line like, we don't want to fund this. We're not really committed. So in Annapolis, the clarity of that message is important. If you're saying we are in transition but committed to these goals, that's going to land differently than just we're waving the white flag, we're unwilling to raise taxes or make the commitment necessary. Those will sound different to the leaders in the legislature who matter.
I agree, but I mean, if we don't lengthen the timeline to allow us the breathing room, our superintendent said, we're going from hiring the best educators in Carroll County to now hiring the good, because the competitiveness in teachers across the state, is very challenging. And we do have, there's only so many that are out there. Give us that breathing room to get out there and recruit the best as we should. But right now, the basement of salaries is, going to be 60,000, and the ladder is going to really grow to a point where we will not be able to fund it And those teachers are going to be going from one place to another, and we're going to be a breeding ground for other communities, other counties, is a major concern. So, I mean, that's part of this. You know, there's a lot of secondary tertiary effects to saying, get it done now. And that's what has got to be very clear to our governor and the legislators, saying, nobody's raising a white flag. We want the best education for our kids, but we got to be able to do it the Carroll County way. And each county is going to be saying, should be saying the same thing, so.
I think that's helpful framing, and mentioning the $60,000 floor is an area where I think the fiscal estimates on this plan, I think they were well-intentioned, but I think they were a little naive about how, like, the world actually works. You simply can't take the $52,000 teacher and move that teacher to 60 and have no other effect in the pay scale. The person who was previously making 60 and has 6 years of experience on that other teacher will absolutely correctly expect, well, now I'm 66, right? And I'm not sure that Part B has been worked into the arithmetic of what it takes to fund education at the level they've got it.
And I'm not going to diss Dr. Kerwin too much, but during the winter conference, when he was on the panel, and this was discussed, and one of the counties said, we can't do this, how can you, where do you expect it to come from? He said, that's a county problem. And he's like, from his perspective, shoving it down to the counties. Now, some gentleman did share with me, he may know a lot about education, more than I'll ever know, but how much does he know about the fiscal responsibilities in implementing Blueprint? That's the question. And it's not for him to answer. It's for us as leaders, so.
I think to that point, it's why we also have to keep this all in context, and why we're also pushing back against not just pushing back against transportation cuts, but also saying, make us whole in transportation. Not just pushing back on cuts to community college, but like keep us
Right.
whole on the formula you gave us there. Because if you're gonna force us to make these hard choices in the PK through 12 education space, don't like exacerbate that problem by gutting our transportation
Right.
funding, gutting our community college funding. So
Right.
I think actually we also need to do a better job of talking about this holistically and saying like Blueprint really is tied to HUR, it really is tied to
Absolutely.
the Cade Community College funding.
Yeah, I agree, and I applaud, as you know, the MACO and the conferences bringing us all together. These could be some of the very specific meetings that we have, because that's where a lot of the good ideas come from. It ain't coming from the dais, it's coming from all of us working together, so. But,
And I'm
yeah.
glad you brought that up too, because those ripple effects across a number of different issues. You brought up earlier state preemption of local zoning, for example, with solar, right? When the state does preempt, and you know this, when the state preempts the counties with zoning, or municipalities for that matter, that also has a financial impact on localities as well. One of the things that I did want to bring up, and it's come to my attention specifically from farmers in the county. Every so often, the state health department changes its regulations or how they go about doing certain things, and we've dealt with a number of health department related issues over the course of the last 2 years of this board. And one that's come up very recently, we have a number of farmers who will supplement what they do with weekend barbecue setup kind of things. And so our health department in the county traditionally was able to give these farmers a temporary food license or food permit for the course of the entire season that they wanted to be open. One application and one fee for the entire season that they wanted to be open. But now new regulations are dictating that these farmers have to file separate applications and file separate fees for every single weekend that they want to be open. And so instead of a $25 fee, for example, for the course of a season, they're now paying $700 or $800, right?
Right.
And so it is affecting a lot of farmers and a lot of small growers in the county. And so I don't know whether the right path to pursue here would be to get the regulation changed back to how a local health department has the discretion to be able to say, I can give you a $125 one application fee for the entire season, or whether there's a way to get the state health department to authorize local health departments to exercise more discretion or have more flexibility in how they apply state code, but that would certainly be a help and certainly something that I know would affect more than just our county.
That's the first I've heard of that specific issue, so I'm grateful to hear it from you. Something we can look into more. We have an active, our environmental health directors as well as our health officers are both affiliates within the MACO umbrella. We work closely with both of them. So my policy team and I will work with them, and like if that was in one of the multiple bills this year that adjusted fee structures, it was mentioned up here before, that was a quiet but deliberate effort by a number of agencies to find themselves increasingly fee-supported rather than depending on general funds. This may have been a small element in a larger policy like that. So I got a pin in it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, I guess we're going to try to wrap up here, but I just wanted to thank you both for coming this morning and welcome to our humble meeting room. You know, the irony of that proclamation we read this morning shouldn't be lost on any of us, the Baltimore Resolves. I mean, you had a local government telling its centralized government, hey, enough already. We think what you're doing is unlawful. And that's what we're seeing right now with some of these initiatives, whether it's cannabis, whether it's the housing issue, whether it's solar is a very stark example. We've got an ordinance in the county here that just says you can't put solar on agricultural land. I mean, we're spending millions of dollars in Carroll County trying to preserve agricultural land, and that's why we did what we did. So, I mean, it may come across as a bit idealistic, maybe politically naive, but if I had a request, it'd be to take that spirit back to MACO and try to impart upon the delegates and the senators that they really, I mean, you're still representing the people from your districts, and that's what you should be fighting for. I look at some of those initiatives from the state as they're just purely an assault on self-governance and home rule. I mean, it's hard to argue I'm wrong with that. Now, how to fight it is a whole different story. But I know that's a very broad request, but if I had any request at all, it would be to try to take that spirit back to MACO. I know it's difficult. I mean, you're doing great work, and I appreciate it. But those are real stark challenges for a lot of us out here in the western part, eastern part of the county. And I think from other counties as well, they could appreciate that.
And I think the solar issue, right or wrong, Maryland is a solar target for the whole country.
Right.
I'm dealing with Colorado, some other states, and they said, we're coming to Maryland, and we're coming to Carroll County, and you know, if we spend a bunch of money and time going through the state process, then are you gonna try to shut us down, you know? And it's a legitimate question, and like you say, we like local control, and we sure aren't getting it on this topic.
It gives me an avenue to make one point about MACO as an organization that I don't want to miss here, and that is, you might be tempted to think that an issue like policy for solar power might be a red and blue split, that maybe your counterparts in the blue-leaning parts of the state might feel differently. They may not care about this as a local issue. Dead wrong. As it turns out, the overwhelming share of issues that MACO takes up through our legislative committee that you've contributed to, you've seen this over the last couple of years, but this is a very stalwart part of our organization is very committed to local control. We don't always prevail in Annapolis. We don't always get our way. But even the most pro-solar members within the MACO leadership, the legislative committee and so forth, still believe that jurisdictions who are concerned about this is our prime farmland, not here, there are other places that make more sense, and we want to draw a map to guide it to smart places. Everybody is behind that should be vested with local agents, not through the PSC, through some paperwork process that's handled simply as a rubber stamp. So as it turns out, this isn't like a 16-8 vote at MACO. This is a 24-0 vote at MACO, that we should be the ones having reasonable community input and guidance on this kind of stuff. Now, I mean, I'm trying to give you a reasonable read of this issue, and we are swimming upstream on this. It is a
Michael,
small miracle we didn't we didn't lose on a bad bill this year.
I do, I appreciate that, and actually, that's what I was gonna share as well, that it's all about local control when you step into the Mako room and the legislative room. Good example, you know, as folks know, I'm a veteran along with Randy and a few others in that room, and every time there's a incentive to cut taxes for our veterans, we never do it because we stay out of that world and allow the local, you know, counties to determine.
They always
what is
listen to
best.
you before they say no.
No, they, yeah. Actually, it's, yeah, they do, and they say, no, you know, but Randy and I, we stand together. He's almost as old as you, but anyway, but the important part about this, honestly, is that, again, I am so impressed with Mako. One, your tenure there is not lost. I mean, you've been there since I was in uniform, and so it's been quite some time. And your staff and your team, that it doesn't just happen in that boardroom. They're out there working with the staffers and with the delegates and the senators, and they kind of do a split. And that's huge, because it prepares us for what are the issues we want to then address to our delegation. And that's why Commissioner Collar and I, you know, every Wednesday, we're going to be down there and we meet with the delegates. Hey, this is what we just talked about. What are your positions, and how can we do this best for Carroll County? So yeah, I was gonna highlight that if you weren't, and I appreciate that point, because it's huge. And folks think, oh, it's Mako, it's down in Annapolis and crazy Annapolis. No, we got to work together. And you know, a lot of the issues you talk about, it ain't about red, white, or blue. It's about what does the community, that county, that jurisdiction want in the best interest for that county. And yeah, so.
And one of the things about Mako that I'm not sure everybody knows, and you said a minute ago, 24-0, there's not too many rooms we set in where counties are all equal.
Yeah.
And at Mako it is, and that's, I think that's awesome.
We have built a reputation in Annapolis. We work with everybody. We are aggressively nonpartisan. We work with every administration. We work with the legislative leaders, and we bring to them credibility that comes from our legislative committee. It's our elected officials from back home who guide positions on bills. This wasn't me saying I don't like the bill. This was you saying we're worried about these two things. And that goes a long way. Like, we don't have a political action committee. We're not like, nobody gets reelected as a state senator because they helped out their county in some small way. So we start behind some of the competition on these issues. So you have to have your own currency. And that's like our reputation and those relationships, that's what you have to build on. It's smart.
It's true.
Want to do a picture?
Anything else?
Picture?
Is there more you want to share, or?
Just point of personal privilege, I just want to applaud all of you for both your comments, but also for doing the citation. The former American government and American history teacher in me, like, I appreciate the comments about the importance of remembering our histories and commemorating it, because I think it is truly super important. So, and thanks for having us
Fantastic.
again today.
So, a photo?
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you. We good?
Always.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for having us.
Good seeing you, Mia.
I will, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
See you, Michael.
See you.
elephants or palm trees or, what's on it? Crabs?
Palm trees.
Palm trees.
Palm trees,
Palm
okay.
trees. Yeah, blue palm trees.
Okay, item 2, LED lighting upgrades at Maeski Park and Deer Park. Morning.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Morning.
So, the Department of Recreation and Parks is requesting us to have approval to go ahead and work with the Matrix Energy Services Incorporated, which is a subcontractor of Baltimore Gas and Electric, to go ahead and retrofit our existing athletic field lighting and some street lighting and building lighting that exist at Maeski Park and Deer Park to LED lighting. And this is through a program called Empower Maryland, which is supplemented by the State of Maryland Department of Energy Administration. So that's where the funding's coming from. This is 100% funded. And of course, with the energy savings, we're talking about somewhere usually between 75 to 80% cost savings once you do convert to LED lighting. And also it saves on ongoing maintenance costs, because when bulbs are burnt out, then we have to get a truck out there with a large boom arm to go ahead and switch out the bulbs, plus you have to pay for the bulbs too. So this is a win-win-win all the way around.
Motion to authorize the Department of Recreation and Parks to coordinate with BGE and the respective subcontractors to upgrade the existing lighting in Maeski Park and Deer Park to LEDs.
Second.
Commissioner Rothstein, are you going to say that this doesn't cost us anything and it actually saves money?
It saves money.
Well, I really appreciate this. This is obviously a serious issue for the Winfield Rec Council. Expands usage. You're right, they can't even find light bulbs anymore. I want to commend you on your negotiating abilities.
Yes,
So,
it actually
nicely
went
done.
from like 80 to 90, and it says,
Yeah.
okay, we'll just fund it for 100%.
Yeah, hey,
Okay.
it all works, so thank you very much. This is great news.
So we
I
have
made,
a motion, we have a second,
Yes.
and any further discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Item 3, request for a public hearing for DAF storage and amendments to Chapter 158.
Commissioner, we do have a public comment card.
Say again? Oh, you do have public comment, and we have no call-ins, correct?
No one on the line, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Jason Green.
All right. Good morning, Commissioners. Unfortunately, I've kind of become a little bit of the de facto speaker for the community, so that's why I'm here today. And I just want to make it clear to the farming community, our goal is to regulate DAF. This has nothing to do with manure, the traditional fertilizer that farmers are using throughout the county. We support the farming community, and I just want to make that clear. I sent you all an email to kind of outline some kind of concerns with allowing storage. We want to make sure that it obviously prohibits leakage and prohibits odors from going on to neighboring properties. There is a little bit of a concern with the setback requirements that were proposed at the Planning Commission with regards to odors. If those odors are controlled, that may help those setback issues. One of the big things for me and my family and other families in the area is the commercial distribution. We do not support that. We have obviously issues we're dealing with now with regards to just using it at one farm, and what we really do not want to happen is it to begin to be distributed to other farms in the area, and this farm that's near us being used as a hub. That would be pretty dramatic issue for us. The other thing, as you're aware, the state is going to be doing their regulations, hopefully within this next month. Their permitting process is going to be on a yearly time frame, and I'd request that if you permit storage, that you restrict any zoning approvals to align with that one-year permitting process with the state. And the reason I ask that is because there could be maintenance issues regarding the tank itself. There could be maintenance issues with the cover itself. And in my opinion, we want to make sure that those things are in place to share that with the state when they come to us every year to make sure that those things are in compliance. So The truck traffic, again, is another big issue for us. We got a lot of tractor and trailers coming back on a one-lane road, and things like that, causing people to back up and dart in the driveways, dart in the yards, and those type things are occurring. So just kind of keep that in mind as you hear the presentation and go through, what's going to be proposed. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
As you may recall, on April 25th, you all heard discussion about the storage of food processing and DAF residuals, and at that time you enacted a moratorium on that storage, and also requested that the Planning Commission consider changes to our county code, specifically Section 158 of our zoning ordinance, to address the storage of food processing and DAF residuals. I'm here with Hannah Weber from our Bureau of Comprehensive Planning to share the Planning Commission's recommendations and to request authorization to proceed to public hearing for recommended changes to our zoning ordinance. So I'll turn it over to Hannah. She's going to give you an overview of what the Planning Commission recommended. We do have one point of a question for you all to give us some direction on, which we discovered as we were trying to incorporate the Planning Commission's recommendations into our recommended text amendments. So we'll cover that as well.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Daphne largely went over this, but just some background information. On April 25th, you all voted to adopt a moratorium on the storage of residuals, and you also gave staff the direction to examine possible regulations to restrict the storage of residuals in the county. Just reaffirming that the application and spreading of residuals is handled by the state, specifically the Maryland Department of Agriculture, and the regulations for storage of residuals is handled by the county. Planning and Zoning discussed this amendment on their May 21st meeting and has forwarded the language on the following slides. So starting out, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation is to allow the storage of residuals as a conditional use in the agriculture zone. So incorporating this into our zoning code would require creating a new use for food processing residual storage, having it as a conditional use in the ag zone and prohibited in the conservation zone. The Planning and Zoning Commission also recommended having this use subject to additional regulations in Chapter 158.002, which is our definitions, Chapter 158.040, which is our distance requirements, and then Chapter 158.175, which would be a new specific chapter for food processing residual storage. Looking at their recommendations closer, they recommended an 800-foot distance requirement from storage structures to other uses. They also recommended that the storage of residuals may not be in an open-top storage structure. The storage of residuals must meet the requirements of the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and the use shall be subject to site plan approval by the Planning Commission. They also recommended adding a definition for open-top storage structure. This would be defined as an open or partially open structure, whether above ground, partially above or below ground level, or lagoon structure used for the storage of an agricultural product, byproduct, soil amendment, and/or food processing residual. So this is just kind of how their recommendation would look in our zoning code. The red language would be new language added to the zoning code. So in Chapter 158.002, adding that definition for open-top storage structure, and then adding a new zoning chapter for storage of food processing residuals, Chapter 158.175, and including all of those recommendations that Planning and Zoning made. So this is where we need some guidance from you all, specifically on the distance requirements. As we discussed, Planning and Zoning recommended an 800-foot distance requirement from storage structures. And incorporating their recommendation into our zoning code, we are trying to fit it in the closest possible relation to what their recommendation is. Staff is recommending the following language, which would be the following uses shall be subject to 4 times the distance requirements in Division A, which is in the blue box below, and shall not be located less than 1,000 feet from any residence district, and adding the food processing residual storage structure to this already existing section. We offer an alternate text amendment if you would like to be more in line with what Planning Commission recommended, which would be strictly sticking to that 800 feet recommendation. This would require staff create a new subsection, specifically saying the following uses shall be subject to 4 times the distance requirement in Division A and shall be located not less than 800 feet. And then the food processing residual storage would be the only use under this new section. So just to clarify, this is the staff recommendation, just to create a simpler and clearer text amendment, incorporating this new use into already existing zoning language. So again, that would be up to your discretion which way you would like to go. And then just next steps, request approval to schedule a public hearing, advertise the public hearing for 2 consecutive weeks, hold the public hearing, and then vote on the proposed amendment. That's all I have.
So if I may ask, and it could just be that I'm simply don't understand, so that I'm in favor of making these things as far as humanly possible from another use, but explain to me the 200 times 4 thing. What is that about?
Yeah, so our distance requirements are laid out similar to what you see in under D. The following uses shall be subject to 4 times. So the 200 times 4 gives you the 800. In other sections, it's shall be subject to 3 times the distance requirements, so 600 feet. So what Planning Commission looked at was similar uses under D, and decided that the food processing residual storage fit most closely with the 4 times the distance requirement, which would be 800 feet. I hope that was clear enough.
That made sense, thank you very much. And so you come down, for example, to say number 3 in that blue box, where it talks about the minimum separation of distance of at least 300 feet, so that would make that 1,200 feet.
Correct.
So why wouldn't we just make it 1,200 feet for everything?
If I could just jump in here, one of the reasons why we wanted to pose this question to you is really for transparency. The Planning Commission specifically discussed a range of different distance requirements. One of them was 1,000 feet. And they had some debate about what the appropriate distance is. Some people felt 1,000 was okay, some people felt 600 was good. They landed on 800. But because they had discussed a higher distance requirement and decided to suggest 800, when we got into looking at these calculations, and some of them were landing at 1,000, some were at 800, some were 1,200, I felt it was important to request your guidance because the Planning Commission had looked at some other options that were even less restrictive than some of those. Again, it's kind of the way our ordinance is written here. If you wanted to go with something that's a little bit more restrictive, then the staff recommendation will get us closer to that. But if you wanted to be a little bit more in line with what the Planning Commission recommended, we have that alternate option to stick with 800.
So I mean, could I just say, well, maybe we should just make it 1,000 feet minimum rather than doing the 200 times 4 thing, just say 1,000 feet? Is that possible, or does that mess up the structure too much?
We would still have to create a new section in, a new subsection in our distance requirements. We do have a subsection that is 5 times the distance requirements, so that would be 1,000 feet.
Okay.
But then you would still see what you see in the blue box, except it would be 200 times 5 and so on and so on.
Gotcha.
But this is what, we were just fitting it into as close as we could to what Planning Commission recommended, into already existing zoning language.
Any thoughts, gentlemen?
Well, there's a lot here to contemplate. I'm concerned about this whole NRCS storage issue. I mean, if it's not an approved storage facility, how do we know that? And, you know, when the material's already in there, it's a little too late. So unless it's NRCS approved, do we need to consider just banning storage there until that's completed? I don't know what that process looks like. We're not really addressing the commercial distribution component. I mean, if a farmer, again, this is not fertilizer, so, you know, if they're not using it themselves, but this is sort of just like a hub, that's a concern. Time limit for storage, you know, why is it there if it's not going to be used? I don't know what happens over time with it. Does it get worse smell? Does it have less efficacy? I have no idea. And then, you know, the zoning certificate issue, whether it should be renewed or not, along with the MDE renewal. So, I mean, those four issues to me still kind of ring out. I don't know if now's the time to fix that. You go to a public hearing, is it too late to kind of come back and tweak those? It's a lot to take in for this issue. Nothing's ever simple, right?
Commissioner Guerin, I'm glad you brought up the one-year renewal, because that makes sense to me, because if we're concerned about whether or not what this stuff is being stored in meets standards, and a one-year, I don't know, inspection or something might help ameliorate those concerns.
Now and again, it's just more added work for your department. You know, is it harder to get MDE to come out than to do it ourselves? It's just a lot of questions.
I will note that Planning Commission did discuss the transportation of the material. It was decided that they didn't want to move forward with restricting that. And they also did discuss only allowing this as a temporary use for only 45 days, storing it on site. And they ultimately decided against that as well and decided to go with the conditional use.
What was the reasoning for deciding against a 45-day period versus making it a conditional use?
I don't recall the specific reasoning. I think there was a line of discussion that related to how this would actually get stored and used, and maybe there wasn't a need to address the 45-day limitation, or that it was something that was best handled just kind of in the regular site plan review and permitting process, that there wasn't a need to specify that storage period.
See, to me, actually, that almost even makes more sense maybe than a one-year permit if we put a specific window of time that this could be stored, and I guess would have to be used within that same period of time. That would address concerns that citizens have back there about this being like a year-round thing. If I'm doing DAF, I'm storing DAF, and I only have it for 45 days, I know, okay, well, I have to use this in 45 days or I'm gonna have to send it back out. And so to me, that certainly makes sense. And then, you know, to get that 45-day, I don't know, would it be a permit or a license to do this for 45 days? I'd have to make sure that my storage bin or structure is inspected. And that speaks to, I know, something that Commissioner Guerin mentioned a minute ago. I mean, is that out of the realm of possibility to require, or to make a requirement for no more than 45 days of storage?
The way that we presented two options to Planning Commission. One was the conditional use that we put in the slides, and another was the temporary use. And the way we outlined it was it would have to get approval by our zoning administrator, and it would only be for 45 days. But then it wouldn't be subject to the distance requirements that we have with the conditional use and the NRCS approved storage and all of that. So ultimately, we'll send whatever you want.
Okay, so why wouldn't it be, if we said 45 days, why couldn't it still be held to certain specifics about, you know, like 1,000 feet from another residence or something? I mean, is it still possible to do that if we have a 45-day period? And if not, why not?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know that we have the expertise to address that question. I know there was some discussion with folks who are on the Planning Commission, who are farmers, who know how these practices work, and that their recommendation was to make it a conditional use with these stipulations. Again, I don't recall the specifics around the temporary storage and what was tilting them in one direction versus another, but it's certainly something that we can revisit, get some additional information on, and bring back to you.
And when we have the public hearing, that day, we could approve it how they have it written, or is there a time frame? Do we have to leave the record open after that? And because of that, should we make changes today, or then, or both?
I'm not sure you're prepared to make changes today. Are there draft regulations out, or is any of that addressed?
We were waiting for their direction on how to go with the distance requirements, so.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the state draft regulations, do we,
Oh, no, they don't address the storage, so this
is
is.
that at all? Any of the 45 days or any of that stuff? I mean, we can have the public hearing and you can.
And make changes then?
Yes.
And so if that's the mindset, then we need to ask them to give us some options, maybe between now and the public hearing.
But, well, I think one of the outstanding questions was the distance, and I think maybe we could settle that today, because it seems, to me at least, that, you know, at least for the sake of the public hearing, because again, we can change things after the public hearing, but if we say, yes, we want to put the maximum amount of distance possible into this before it goes to public hearing, I mean, that's certainly something that we could do today, right, Tim?
And were you saying if we did the 5 times to get to the 1,000 feet, you already have that as an option, so?
Yeah, that's already a section in our zoning
Yeah,
code, so.
Is that good?
Yeah, you make a great point. So some of the concerns you've heard here today from a few of the commissioners, is that enough for you to go back and relook at these prior to the public hearing, or do we need to make a motion for you to include these things? I mean, you make a good point. We have some more things to do here, so we can try to
Yeah.
be efficient.
Yeah, we can certainly move forward with moving to public hearing with what we've got here, depending on how you want to give us guidance on that distance requirement. And then in the meantime, get additional information on these items that you've identified. We can bring that to you as part of the plan of the public hearing. You'll also hear testimony from other folks that may factor into your decision-making. And then at that point, you can choose to modify what you've sent to public hearing, however you're inclined.
Quick question. With the Planning Commission's recommendations, they had the distance requirements of structures for food processing, residual storage must be 800 feet from other uses. I'm just asking for clarification. So other uses, let's say it's on a property. Would that be any type of use? Would it be if there's a residency somewhere on that open property, would have to be minimum of that 800 is what they're looking at? Or if they were growing or storing or utilizing in any other fashion of ag, it would have to be 800 feet from that then, correct?
That's actually a simplification of the language that's in that blue box
Gotcha.
A. So other uses is referring to any lot in a residence district, any residential lot of less than 3 acres in the ag or conservation district, and on adjoining lots of 3 acres or more, minimum separation distance of at least 300 feet.
Okay, I
So
was
it's
just
not
curious.
exclusively any other residences, but it meets those three.
I was just curious if it created any, I guess I'd say, challenges on the property in which it's on, because if you had other usage within that property, would that have to be factored into whatever that distance would be?
Yeah, no, that was specifically referencing.
Referencing other
that
properties? Okay,
Cross-reference to Section A.
okay.
So my thought is, going along, I guess, with kind of what Commissioner Kyler said, that I would recommend us pursuing the I don't know, the best way to, the times 5. What's the proper way of saying that?
Just what you said.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
And do I need to make a motion to?
Might as well.
I'll make a motion to increase the distance requirement from 4 times to 5 times under 158.0 8.040, Section D.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Well, no, now,
And now
now you got to proceed.
Okay, we need to make a motion.
Yes.
So I'll make a motion to proceed with scheduling a public hearing for the above-mentioned text amendments to Chapter 158 of the County Zoning Code.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any further questions or discussion?
I just want to share, both of you did a very good job. Daphne, up front, I always appreciate when somebody can get up front and say, this is what we're going to talk about, these are the questions we're going to be asking you, and then, and then capture it. So you did very well. And Hannah, your expertise is really becoming very apparent in recognizing the chapters and taking complex problems like these and making simple solutions. The simplicity of this is not easy. And, folks should be, that are listening to this should understand that a lot of these are complex concerns because of the secondary, tertiary effects in community and neighbors, and to coming up with simplistic approaches that you do, I'm looking at you, Hannah, but your team, Daphne, does, is really valuable, and I appreciate that, so
Thank you.
that's all.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 5, Community Development Block Grant Family Shelter Renovation.
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Commissioners. Okay. Hey, good morning, Commissioners. We're here today for a public hearing for the FY25 Community Development Block Grant for the Family Shelter Renovation. I'm joined today by Deb Standiford, our grants manager with the county. Also in the audience, we have Kathy Baker, the director of the local behavioral health authority here in Carroll County with the health department. And then also we have Scott Yard joining us in the audience from our human services program of Carroll County, our shelter and homeless services provider that we contract with. And so today I would look to Tim. Do you want to open the public hearing?
Thanks for the warning.
2 seconds. What more?
Commissioners, this is a public hearing to solicit any public comment on the proposed FY25 Community Development Block Grant, Family Shelter Renovation. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment publicly on the proposal? And we do have one. Can you come to the microphone and give us 3 minutes of your comments, please?
Yeah, it probably won't be that long, but yes. So I'm Kathy Baker, the director of the local behavioral health authority, as well as the director of Bureau of Prevention, Wellness, and Recovery. And I just want to say I think this is a very important relocation for this facility. We have staff that are peer support specialist and our case manager for the homeless that actually work with clients from the facility, as well as the other shelters in the community. So I think that, the more we can do to broaden the expansion of this and give the children a little bit more space to be children as opposed to a concrete patio or, walk to the city park and those kinds of things, I think it would be very nice. Plus, there's going to be provided, from my understanding, more private space for the families. So we are in support of that initiative. So any questions?
Any other public comment?
Morning, everybody. Scott Yard, Executive Director for HSP. As the vendor and partner of the county, this is a project that's probably been a long time coming, and we just needed someone with a vision to make it happen. So we want to thank Celine for driving this and Debbie for being the expert in all these intense grants that it takes to get these projects going and bring out outside funds. As far as HSP goes, we look at this as a great opportunity because it's going to allow us to do more with the same. Essentially, it's going to cost a lot of money, and we're going to have resources from other grants, but having both of our shelters on the same campus is going to allow us to leverage our other programs and services so that we can enhance safety, we can enhance case management, and we have more staff on site at different times to increase our ratios for staff and participants. What it's also going to allow is a more balanced and more appropriate setting for the children. Right now, children are in the 4th floor of an office building. The rooms don't have ceilings. It's very loud. It's very sterile and non-comforting. Moving it to this new shelter is going to put the children in a much better place so that they can have the most stable environment possible. As you know, being removed or evicted, it's very traumatizing for a child, and we want to try to do everything we can do to make them have the best transition back to a normal life, essentially. What this also does is it really is going to help alleviate 2G poverty, and what that means is second generation. When a child grows up in a homeless shelter, the chance of them being in a homeless shelter or in poverty greatly increases. So by providing a newer facility that will allow us to have more resources in the facility and leverage other services such as what Kathy was talking about, the chance of diminishing generational poverty in Carroll County is going to be increased rapidly. Thank you.
And no others and no callers, correct?
No callers.
I want to just add something for the public hearing record. The state has just over $5.5 million available for this round of funding, and the county will request the maximum that we can, which is $800,000. CDBG, or Community Development Block Grant, supports public facilities that are devoted to providing services to low and moderate clients, including homeless families. The public can contact the Carroll County Grants Office at 225 North Center Street, Westminster, Maryland, 410-386-2212, if they would like to review a draft of the fiscal 25 CDBG application. And that will be available starting today through June the 7th.
And I did have just a couple more. We came before you on May 2nd to request the public hearing, and when we did that, we presented information about this relocation project. In 2021, we did purchase as the county this property, which is now entitled the Cove building, for the purpose of the relocation of the shelter, as well as a combined use of the space, which includes some of our citizen services program offices, and then also some additional space. And then we've renovated a piece of that building for a conference room that can be used by the community as well as our internal users for trainings and other meetings. So the space is really going to be a community space, and the Cove stands for the Center for Opportunity, Value, and Empowerment, because we know that in that building, that's what we would like to do with the space that's inside of there, be able to lift people up and empower people and put them into stability, whether it's through aging programs, other government programs, or the shelter itself. So with that, a public hearing is a requirement, as Debbie said, of the grant application for Community Development Block Grant funding. And we did advertise this in the Carroll County Times on May 24th, 2024. And currently, in the past 4 years, the shelter has served 160 adults and 202 children, which I think are very good statistics to be reminded of as we're moving forward with this project, because a lot of times if you're not seeing homelessness or what you think homelessness looks like, we do have some folks in the county that need this support.
So for something like this, would a letter from the Board of County Commissioners submitted with the application of the grant be beneficial, helpful? Would it improve the odds?
Your signature on that application is really what is the
Okay.
support. So in that signature authority, you're really providing that backing.
And you'll sign a resolution that says
Okay.
that, you have supported it and when it happened, and I think that's.
Just want to make sure.
Have we received 800,000 in the past?
Yeah, we got the maximum award for the DV Safe House.
Yeah.
We got it for the Boys and Girls Club gym, Respite Inn.
Okay.
We got the full award, ARC a little less, and then Access and Youth Services. So of these projects, the only one was the ARC, and they didn't need the full 800. We just did HVAC out there, so.
So we have a pretty good track record on how to use their money.
It is competitive. I mean, you know, as a non-entitlement jurisdiction, we have to compete with all the other non-entitlement jurisdictions for the 5.5 million. But the state's aware of the project. I have been also speaking to CDBG staff, our project manager, about the project. And, you know, we're doing our very best to put a really competitive grant together for their review.
I mean, success gets success. I mean, if they see that we use money well for the services in community, they're gonna be like, let's continue in that. in
Our
that
success
path.
is their success.
Absolutely. So I appreciate all this work.
Are the commissioners required to leave the record open for 7 days?
No, and I just put that, well, because of the grant timeline, I couldn't leave it open for 10, but we can
we
do
do it
it for
today?
7 or less. Yeah, we don't have to keep it open at all, but we can, but I couldn't keep it open for 10 and meet. I need a little time to incorporate any public comment that I would get and address that in the application. So if we received public comment, I would want to include that.
But you don't have to leave it open
Open at all.
You
We
can
could
just
close it
We
today.
can close it today.
Make the decision, be done.
Yeah, so I'm gonna move the Board of Commissioners close the public hearing and approve the submission and acceptance of the FY25 Community Development Block Grant.
Second.
Any further discussion? And so the intent is, it's closed today?
Yeah.
Which gives you some more time. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Oh, this is great.
Thank you.
Request for approval to hire a grant-funded continuum of care coordinator position.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
You can just go down to that little, right next, yeah.
Okay, good morning, Commissioners. I'm joined now with Danielle Yates, our Bureau Chief of Housing and Community Connections. And we are here today requesting approval for a grant-funded new position for our Continuum of Care Coordinator. The, right now, I'm showing a organizational chart for Carroll County Government's Bureau of Housing and Community Connections to show where this new position would fall. It would fall under the Bureau of Housing, and it would really support all of our continuum of care operations. The Bureau of Aging, the Bureau of Housing and Community Connections has historically been the support agency for a lot of the efforts with our continuum of care. Our application process that we go through on an annual basis, which is a collaborative application process, pulls from all the different service providers of homeless services, our homeless management information system, and really requires us to all year long be looking at what we've committed to in our past year's grant application, whether it's trainings for community partners, whether it's data tracking and reporting systems, whether it's monitoring our community partners as they're implementing some of the funding streams and the services that we've subgranted with them for. That falls within the Bureau of Housing and Community Connections in many ways, and we have to make sure that we are meeting all of those pieces of that grant. And so in doing that, HUD this year has recognized that there is a much higher demand for service and that collaboration and that monitoring and that processing and compliance for that. And so what they have recognized that with is adding additional funding to our NOFA application. And so they have increased that funding from what was typically around $12,000 to $15,000 per year to over $50,000 per year for admin funds to help support this effort to coordinate the COC application and then following it throughout the year. So I'm going to turn it over to Danielle to speak a little bit to the position specifically, which would be funded and how it would be funded, and we have a slide to present to you on that as well.
So as the collaborative applicant for the Continuum of Care Grant funding, the county is required to comply with the provisions of 24 CFR 578.7. And we are also responsible to coordinate the implementation of housing and services systems within our COC's geographic area. Specific duties for the COC planner include annual monitoring of all of the COC projects awarded through the Continuum of Care's geographic area, which include both programmatic and financial reviews. It's communicating the COC's goals and gaps of the COC to the state on behalf of the Maryland's consolidated plan, as well as providing feedback in regards to that. Staff assisted setting up annual action steps and plans, and they evaluate progress towards our goals. That includes the identification and coordination of required trainings within our community to raise awareness and enhance our skills that can help prevent and end homelessness within our community. In addition, they provide information to up to 5 of our most active COC work groups, subcommittees, and committees, and they act as the liaison with our executive committee to correspond back and forth with these groups. Next slide. Okay. The requirements associated with the funding have been distributed between multiple positions within the housing agency, but primarily to the bureau chief. As the continuum and its funding continue to grow, providing the oversight and assistance required through the COC planning grant has become challenging and time-consuming for our agency. The support this position will provide ensures that the COC will meet all of the federal regulations and requirements. It also ensures that we're meeting all local and state goals through the consolidated plan, as well as ensuring all programs meet the programmatic and financial responsibilities and requirements as well. If you go to the next slide, you'll see this is the actual projected cost for the COC coordinator at a grade C11 for 40 hours a week. The total annual cost, including salary and all fringe, will be $103,293.92. Our next slide shows you how we will support this position. It will be the COC planning grant, plus the county match and the Homeless Solutions Program grant. We appeared in front of the board previously and have received permission to receive both funding sources that are here. The COC planning grant was approved back on September 14th of 2023. The Homeless Solutions Program grant was approved back on May 2nd of 2024. This requires no additional county funding from the county as well. Are there other questions that we can answer for you in regards to the position?
Can I just make another note? If you recall, when we were, the position committee, these positions, this one and the next one that's on the agenda for our aging bureau, both of these positions were sent on to the position committee for review during the budget process. And because we were bringing positions that were fully funded through fee-for-service or grant funding, they were recommended by the position committee. And Deb Effingham mentioned that when she was here that day, that we not be required to go through that process because we had the funding available. So they looked at these as a different structure of a position because we have the support of the funding.
The challenge is always relying on grant positions, and then when the grant money dries up.
So it's a very good question. So
Thank you.
funding in both of these grants we have had over 20 years.
Yeah.
It has increased throughout the years to meet the priorities. We know that with DHCD and Secretary Day, shelter and housing services are his most important and critical point or agenda. So we feel very confident that this funding will continue just like it has for the last 20 years, 20 plus years.
How many positions are grant funded within citizen services right now?
I would have to get that total number back to you.
Yeah.
But well over 20 positions.
Okay.
Several.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for us up here, it's good edification to understand how many are grant funded, and then as they're grant funded, is it an annual renewal for the grants, or is it every 2-3 years? I mean, I don't know. And then again, always taking a grant position, we've got to recognize that position may go away, or we may have to determine to transition it into our billets. And that's a very, that's difficult, especially during challenging times, so.
I appreciate you bringing that up, Commissioner Rothstein, because that was actually where I was going. And then just for anybody that's watching, I know we're showing the support position funding. The breakdown's a little different than what we've got in front of us, if I'm not mistaken, because it's showing COC planning grant is 50,000, then it's showing a county match is 12,500.
Yes.
So I just wanted to mention that for anybody that's watching, that there is, subtract that from the 62.5, that 12.5 is the county match. But I do appreciate the additional information on the position and how that moves forward.
Many of the grants, especially, I know Gina and the aging team were just in front of you, and we brought the area plan and the formula grants coming through, and a lot of those, again, are federal funds through the Older Americans Act that are coming through to support operations and programs in that line. And those type of grant funds, again, they are what we call annual renewable grants as formula funding through, because it's designated in the Older Americans Act, the funding tied to them.
And that's the same with our housing authority, that is federal funds that come through. It's not that we have to apply, it's funding that we receive, and as long as we stand in good standing, it's funding that we're guaranteed to run that public housing authority. Again, we take no county dollars there. We are completely supported with the federal dollars that we receive annually for that program.
And one of the pieces with the COC funding is once we have that award and we remain in good standing with our programs, that funding will continue. So that when we receive funds through that COC NOFA application, even if it's a bonus project that we receive funding for in a year, that will continue on as long as we continue to be in good standing with that program line, which it makes it a more sustainable funding source.
Motion to approve the hiring of a Continuum of Care Coordinator position.
Second.
Have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, approval to hire grant-funded senior inclusion program compliance coordinator.
They do have some of the longest titles in citizen services.
I know we're looking at that, right?
I just love spending people's money. Good.
I couldn't think of another one.
Gina used to have the longest title in the world.
And now Bobby has that
Yeah.
title. So we're working with HR on our position description process. So we'll be looking at that title for sure. So again, I'm joined now by Rich Otone, who is our Community Services Supervisor with the Bureau of Aging and Disabilities, and then Lindsay Davis, who is our Aging Fiscal Manager with the Bureau of Aging and Disabilities. And we're here, as you said, to request approval to hire a grant-funded Senior Inclusion Program Compliance Coordinator. And let me get to that PowerPoint. So, the Senior Inclusion Program, oh, yes.
Next to the slide. Yep, you got it.
Thanks. The Senior Inclusion Program was implemented over 30 years ago within the Bureau of Aging and Disabilities, and in a partnership with the Developmental Disabilities Administration, who provides funding that is tied to the person, and then we're licensed to be a provider of services for the folks that want to come into our retirement program. So it's a Medicaid-funded program, and it's fee-for-service billing, and it generates its own funding with no history of running a deficit. We operated under a billing system called PCIS2 in the past, but that has recently changed, and we've moved into a new billing and rate structure under the LTSS system. Our program operates Monday through Friday, except for county holidays and closures, and we are licensed for up to 25 participants. And we do have requirements for our staffing ratios, which is a different structure than a lot of the programs and services we provide across the board within our department. We have a program manager in the Senior Inclusion Program. This position would be directly under that program manager as a compliance coordinator. And then we have a SIP program specialist, which really schedules and facilitates the networking with community partners to develop programming and be responsive to the care plans of the individuals in the program and make sure that we have what they are looking for, because this is all about personal choice. We also have 4 full-time SIP program aides and then 4 part-time SIP program aides that support this program. The new position that we are requesting would be a C09 on our classification scale, and it would be $48,819 as the salary. The freight for the position would be $49,074, with a total cost for the position of $97,893. We budget for the total cost of the fullest benefit package possible, selecting the higher coverage to be sure that we can cover the cost. So this is our projected revenue and staff expenditure, projected to have 780 year inclusion program. All salary costs, $357,000, and all fringe costs, $277,000, for a maximum salary and fringe of $634,553. And you will note that that is including, so we have the funding to support. Rich, if I don't.
Sure. Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
The PCIS-2, or Provider Consumer Information System, we live in acronyms, so I figured I'd spell it out, was a rate-based system. The rates were broke into two components. One would be the individual would be assigned a rate based on level of care, and then the provider was assigned a rate which would be the same for every provider in the state of Maryland. And then you add the two together and you would get a daily rate. The participants, in order for the senior inclusion program to bill through that system, participants had to had to be there for 4 hours a day. And that was pretty much the only thing we needed to verify. We would verify, obviously, program services, and we would have that documented. But the only thing that the state was looking for in terms of payment was that we could verify 4 hours a day. And we had a system in place that worked well for that, and we've been able to do that pretty well over the course of time. The billing required less than 2 hours per month of time to do. I used to do it. The current program manager has also been doing it, and it was a fairly easy thing to do. It was mundane, but it was easy to do, and it took us about 2 hours per month. Then we move into the long-term services and support billing system, or the LTSS. And billing times for each individual are documented in 15-minute increments. We no longer have a rating system for level of care for participant. We are paid simply for the service that we provide. There are currently 4 services that we provide under that system. They range in payment from $365 to $1,763 per 15-minute increment. We have to, the staff are much more involved now in what they have to do versus what they were doing before. They have to be very clear on what service they provided and for how long that service took place. We have to assure that the staff were properly trained to provide that service at the time the service was provided. We have to have that documentation in place. We have to make sure that the time cards or the VTI system matches what we said occurred. So if we say staff A worked with participant A from 9 to 1, well, we better make sure they were clocked in from 9 to 1. If they aren't, we could lose the payment. What has happened is it takes, my approximation, about 83% more time to do this than it did before. Whereas I could do a whole month in 2 hours, it takes us 2 hours to do 2 days of billing, because we have to check this constantly over and over and over again. And so what's happened is that the program manager and myself, and now Lindsay also helps, we get involved with this, but we are running behind. We're about 2 months behind in our billing. The senior inclusion program is running well and has the funding to operate, but we don't want to fall further behind. And so with everything else that we do,
it's very difficult for us to focus just on that. And we don't have the ability to pull one staff to do just that on a daily basis. The program manager is responsible for overall management of the program. That could be incident reports, making sure programs are happening, making sure transportation is there, following up with DDA. We have a program planner who just makes sure that we do have plans in place, that, and making sure that that documentation is also there. And those are vital positions. And that's why we have to, we're here to ask for the position now. Otherwise, it's just, I'm afraid of just how far we could fall behind.
Rich, cutting to the chase, I think you're convinced us.
Okay.
One, there's no county match. Two, you know how to, oversee grant positions very well, and the need for this as you're overtasked. So, this just makes sense. So I'm going to move that the Commissioners approve to hire a full-time grant-funded compliance coordinator position.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any more discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the next item is a change order for engineering services for the Longleaf Pine Road Water Main Project. Thank you, guys.
Good morning to both of you.
Good morning,
Morning. The Office of Procurement, in cooperation with the Bureau of Utilities, requests the Board of Commissioners approval of a change order to Whitman, Reichert and Associates in the amount of $10,497 to provide compensation for the redirection of the design approach to the Longleaf Pine Road Water Main Project by county staff. The requested change order is within the adopted budget.
Gentlemen, this item is for a change order to the original scope of work for the Longleaf Pine Road Water Main Project that I initially brought before the board in August of last year. Very briefly, the overall project will result in a substantial increase in water pressure for approximately 120 residential properties located in the immediate vicinity of the Martz water storage tank. During the review of the 30% drawings for this project, the Bureau staff identified an engineering approach that would be more cost-effective to construct and more cost-effective to maintain during its service life. So we directed the consulting firm to take that approach on behalf of the Bureau. So the change order request is to modify the drawings to reflect this new approach. Any questions for me?
Motion to approve a change order to Whitman, Reckart and Associates LLP WRA in the amount of $10,497.00 for engineering services to the Longleaf Pine Road Water Main Project.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Now a contract award for stream relocation and stabilization improvements for the Oklahoma Interceptor.
The Office of Procurement, in cooperation with the Bureau of Utilities, requests your approval to award a contract for the construction of stream relocation and stabilization improvements for the Oklahoma Interceptor in the vicinity of an unnamed tributary to Snowden's Run, to Magstone LLC of Union Bridge in the amount of $199,994.75. These improvements were recently advertised for bid on public purchase, and 9 qualified proposals were received and are summarized in the table below. The proposal submitted by Magstone LLC is within 18% of the engineer's estimate and represents a fair value. The bid amount is within the adopted budget.
Gentlemen, this is for the construction portion of the project that I brought before the board earlier this month to award construction inspection services. As per the briefing paper, there was a large amount of interest in this project, and we did receive 9 bids. This item is for the construction of the stream location and stabilization improvements for an exposed sewer main that is located to the south of Shelby Court. This project will relocate a meandering stream channel and will stabilize the exposed main. The length of time of the construction activity once work begins is 32 construction days. The low bidder has a very good working history with the county, and we obviously expect for this to continue with this project. Any questions for me?
I'll move the board award contracted for the construction of stream relocation stabilization improvements for the Oklahoma Interceptor in the vicinity of an unnamed tributary to Snowden Run to Magstone LLC in the amount of $199,994.75.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Item 9, acceptance of congressionally directed spending award.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning, Sheriff. Morning.
Sorry for the loss in your department.
Thanks.
How you doing?
Sergeant John LeBrun, he was a 26-and-a-half-year veteran, suffered a medical emergency last night at his house in New Windsor and unfortunately passed away. So he's a popular guy in the jail. Just worked a couple of days ago, but yeah, so they're coping with it, but it's a 24/7 operation, so we can't shut down. So we're working through it all. So I appreciate the messages from last night. I was on the phone with Commissioner Gurin last night when I was heading down to New Windsor and meeting with the family and going through all that. So difficult time for the office, but we'll work through it. So I appreciate the support. Thank you. So my office was awarded in full a congressional directed spending grant to design and outfit the forensics lab in the new sheriff's headquarters. Senator Van Hollen was the sponsor of that earmark. We've been working with his office, specifically Mrs. McDonald, and my forensic folks have been working with his office to design this grant. It's in the amount of $500,000, and it's timely because we're in the mid-stride of designing this new headquarters, and this part of it for the forensic lab, we will consult someone, we'll bring on a consultant to help us with the funding that you've supplied, the additional funding that the senator has gotten for us, and then put together a really high-quality forensics lab, and some of the things that the project will look at. I've discussed with you all before that I'd like to lobby the ATF and have a NIBINS test facility here so that we can test firearms and take the shell casings and put them in a system that will identify other shell casings from the region or throughout the country that were collected by law enforcement that were matched for crimes. And you have to have specifics with that location in your building, and ATF comes out and inspects it and approves it. So I'll lobby to do that. This building will have a garage for a small bay so that the forensics folks can bring in a vehicle, whether it's involved in a fatal collision or some other sort of crime, so that it has a lift, so we can lift the vehicle up. And there's special lighting that can be purchased with this grant in order to enhance the ability to collect evidence and seize it appropriately. So there's a lot that this grant can be used for. It's no match to the county. It's simply a grant that you all have to say, yes, we accept, and I'm assuming you will.
Motion to accept the congressionally directed spending award for the sheriff's office.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. My only comment, the senator, and I think it's Nan Mann as his local rep, they do a lot of things for us. They communicate well with us and do a lot of stuff.
I've said this before, so it's not much different than the grant that Congressman Raskin, fought for us to get the body-worn camera. That was $1.5 million. I don't care what party you're with. If it is specifically to enhance law enforcement and what we're doing in the county, then I'll work with you, and they've been wonderful to work with. So this particular building, I've seen some comments, I'm unapologetic for pushing this building because it's sorely needed. And if anybody listening doesn't believe that, then give me a call, and they can walk through my facilities any day of the week, and they'll change their minds on what's needed for my office. So I appreciate the support of the commissioners to get the building to a point where we're close to, we're kind of in mid-stride with designs where it's going to go, how it's going to be situated, but this funding's timely with getting the forensic side of it situated appropriately, which is sorely needed here, so.
And I appreciate that. I appreciate, again, Commissioner Kyler bringing this up because Congressman Ruppersberger with the Boys and Girls Club, Senator Cardin, I mean, they all,
We're
Congressman
tired of
Raskin.
hearing from us because we call them
It's awesome.
regularly. When we know annual earmarks come
They
out, we're.
actually work
Yeah.
together, which
Yeah.
is great.
Yes.
And
No,
so they all look
they
at
do.
everything and they all work together to pick
They-
instead of everybody going off on their own.
That's right.
So it's been
And
great.
they reach out to us all the time, and like you said, I don't care if it's red, blue, I, whatever.
Yeah.
They got money. I like to use other people's money, and they are always pushing.
Yep.
What are the requirements? So I really appreciate those type of efforts.
Yeah, they're wonderful to work with, and we try and tailor projects based on the information they put out.
Yeah.
And they're always looking for public safety projects, they're always looking for how to better enforce, and the crime lab piece of it with the ability to work with jurisdictions east of here, and the ability to get shell casings analyzed. This will be a hub, once we get this building done and this crime lab done, this will kind of be a central hub for agencies, not only in this county, but around the region, to come to and work out of so that they can process evidence a little bit more efficiently, so.
Cool.
Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you,
Thanks.
gentlemen, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Do we have any public comment?
Yes, sir, I do have a caller online. If you could use *6 to unmute, you'll have 3 minutes, and please identify yourself.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. Catherine Adelaide, Carroll County Republican Central Committee. Sorry, I missed you last week. I was driving and pulled over and called in, and the session had just ended. But mainly, I just wanted to wish everyone, excuse me, a happy and safe Memorial Day weekend. I appreciated your own updates on Memorial Day weekend on your Priority Carol, which is always the fun part of the work session for me and maybe for you as well. My father was a World War II Army veteran, so I always remember him. And I want to thank all of those who served on the board and the community who is ever listening. I attended church on Sunday, Church of the Open Door, with Pastor Rick Holbrook, who gave a touching sermon about his experience as a Vietnam veteran and how coming to one church service at Open Door, where they lifted up and supported the veterans, totally changed his life. And he went on to become, a leading pastor at the church and does pastoral counseling. As opposed to, he contrasted those who did not get that support during that difficult Vietnam alcohol. So just a really uplifting Memorial Day story. And then moving on to specific Republican news, I attended the MDGOP Spring Convention held in Hagerstown, Maryland, May 17th and Saturday, May 18th. And the highlight of that was a personal telephone call from former President Trump. Commiserating with us, Republicans in Maryland. He knows what persecution feels like. So it was very uplifting. It was a surprise and a lot of encouragement. We also elected delegates to the RNC convention for July 15th through the 18th in Milwaukee. And finally, we had a breakout section on election integrity efforts going on in the state through the state MDGOP. And speaking of election integrity in Carroll County, the primary is over finally, and the results were certified on Friday. The last canvass that I attended was Friday, May 24th. And before that, I attended a canvass on May 22nd and completed my first set of challenges. I challenged 224 provisional ballots, and that was quite an experience and an adventure, really. And I will be giving a more detailed report on that at our meeting tonight, Central Committee meeting tonight at 6:30 at the Westminster Senior Center. Beyond that, we are doing carnivals. We have the Gamber Carnival opened last Friday. I attended the opening night. It was a lot of fun. They'll be going through Saturday. We have free signs for the Board of Education, our candidates, Malvo and Zimmer. So we hope to see you all come out to the carnivals and stop by the trailer and say hello and get a sign. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Thank you. Commissioners, any items for open admin?
No, sir.
Just a couple, just very quick things. One, I did appreciate County Executive Olszewski and Michael Sanderson coming, talking about Mako, and highlighting some of the activities. One thing they didn't share as much, I mean, they definitely sent kudos to Roberta and her participation, but there is a lot of participants that we have in Carroll County that lead the force down in the Maryland Association of Counties, both in the conferences and then also in the other, meetings throughout the year. The leadership, from, Ms. Wyndham and Mr. Zaleski and, Chrissy Bixler.
Valerie Hawkins.
Yeah, Valerie Hawkins.
Ripper, yep.
I mean, it's huge. And so we lead the way in so many, methods on promoting Carroll County and also promoting Carroll County in the region and best practices of the region and the state through Mako. So really appreciate.
And we've actually had
Leadership.
staff do sessions at Mako.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's huge. So, and then the staff at Mako, I highlighted very briefly, they're just phenomenal, and they're very, very smart, typically younger individuals with a lot of responsiveness and responsibility put on them, working with staffs in legislature and also the actuals, whether it be delegates and or senators, also the administration. So we work with them very closely. So I just want to throw a shout out to them as well. The last thing I just want to say, openly, we have our budget that has been approved, and we're moving forward. There's still questions out there. I'm still, I won't say still, I am being asked, why did I do one thing or another? And I sent, I think, a couple of you a response that I gave, very open about it. I think we need to get together sooner rather than later. In the military, you call it a hot wash, and then you go through an after actions reviews and build an understanding of why we did what we did, and continue to build our best practices as we go through FY '25 to '26. So working with Roberta and staff, obviously getting ourselves together to doing that, I think is going to be important. So we're very candid amongst each other and saying, okay, let's figure out how we're going to continue to move forward, because it was challenging this year. I believe it's going to be challenging next year. And we just have to, as we get income tax, increments coming in, it's going to start painting the picture for us. So, but I'm proud we got an approved budget, and I'm proud that, Carroll County continues to lead the way, regardless of an individual votes for something or not. I believe our government is the best form of government to run a county. So, and was highlighted as well over the last so many weeks. But those are the things I have on my mind.
I'd like to piggyback very quickly and briefly on budget. It is surprising to me how charter governments, some of the towns, some of the city, how little some of the councilmen are involved with a budget. And here we have a place where we may fight and argue a little bit, but it's five of us very deeply into it. And I just appreciate that, and I think I like how we do it. And we got a budget approved, so we made
That's
it.
right.
But yeah, and anybody else? Agenda.
Morning,
Good morning,
Wanda. How are
Wanda.
you?
Monday, June 3rd, Century High School's graduation, Commissioner Rothstein at 9 a.m. At 3 p.m., Commissioner Vigliotti's at Francis Scott Key's graduation. On Tuesday, the 4th, Commissioner Guerin at 9 a.m.'s at South Carroll's, Commissioner Rothstein at 3 p.m.'s at Liberty, and the Carroll County Chamber of Commerce Launch Carroll Young Professionals Networking at Island Green, Commissioner Vigliotti at 5 p.m. On Wednesday, Winters Mill, 9 a.m., Commissioners Gordon and Kyler. 2 p.m., Overdose Prevention Policy Group at the Health Department, Commissioner Guerin. 3 p.m., Man Valley's graduation, Commissioner Kyler. 3 p.m., Maryland Governor's Workforce Development Board, Commissioner Rothstein. 6 p.m., Planning and Zoning, Commissioner Gordon. On Thursday, 8 a.m., closed admin, 9 a.m., open session. Friday, Carroll 80th anniversary of D-Day landing by the 29th Infantry Division. And I'm going to make a couple phone calls, see who's coming. You haven't heard more yet, right?
No.
Yeah. And I think last year we spent about 45 minutes having them tell us stories and do stuff. So I'm hoping it's going to be similar, but by coincidence, I knew a number of the ones that were here last year, and I'm going to ask if they're coming back. Item 1, option to purchase O'Connell property, Royal Legacy Program. Item 2, approval to purchase upfitting of 17 sheriff's vehicles. Item 3, contract award, wastewater treatment chemical department of Public Works. Item 4, cleaning of the Francis Scott Key Force Main. Item 5, arc flash analysis of Eagle Ridge, Lake Forest, and Snowden's Run pump stations. Item 6, evaluation of Francis Scott Key Pumping Station and Force Main. Public comment, admin open, and agenda review. Then there's closed for land acquisition. At 1 p.m., Westminster High School's graduation, Commissioner Gordon. At 5 p.m., Historical Society Anniversary Variety Show, Commissioners Gordon and Kyler. Friday, Carroll County Realtors Legislative Panel Discussion at Piney Branch, Commissioners Gordon, Kyler, and Rothstein. At 3 p.m., Raven Tree Dedication, City of Westminster, Fenby Farm Road, Commissioner Kyler. Saturday, June 8th, Every Step Counts, Manchester Valley High School, Commissioner Kyler. Sunday, it's Commissioner Guerin's turn for podcast.
Is there a reason I wasn't invited to the Carroll Young Professionals Organization?
Not
I
with,
can't
it, not
think
with
of
a tie
any.
like that.
Hey, you think it was a tie?
It was the tie.
All you got to do is register, Tim. You could sneak in.
I suspect I've aged out.
If you want to be called Timmy, we can consider it.
Is there a program that benefits
started
me?
Huh?
Is there a program that benefits me and the young?
Like senior
Absolutely not.
working professionals?
You could be a test project.
That's right.
Monday, June 10th, no activities. Tuesday, June 11th, Therapeutic Recreation Day. Commissioners Kyler, Rothstein, and Vigliotti. 11:15, Special Olympic Law Enforcement Torch Run. Commissioners Gordon, Kyler, Rothstein, and Vigliotti. 7 p.m., Ag Center Board Meeting, Commissioner Kyler. Wednesday, Board of Ed meeting. Thursday, 8 a.m. closed admin, 9 a.m. open. Priority Carroll World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Item 1 is exercise option to purchase property through the county program for Ag Press. Public comment, agenda review at 6 p.m. Joint Carroll and Frederick County MML dinner at the links of Celadon and Mount Airy, Guerin, Kyler, and Rothstein.
I'm no longer going to that. I'm attending a Fort Meade Alliance meeting instead, and Vivian has that information, so.
Wanda, you can add me to that, though.
Okay.
Thanks.
Friday, annual Flag Day event picnic at the Farm Museum, Kyla Rothstein and Vigliotti. Saturday shows nothing, and it's Commissioner Rothstein's turn to do the podcast. Any changes, additions, deletions, agenda? And we need a motion to adjourn and go into close for land acquisition.
Motion to adjourn and go into closed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hmm.